honorable dignitaries, teachers, and my fellow students. I wish everyone a very pleasant morning. It is so heartening to see dipsides gathered like this after a long, long time. So give yourselves a round of applause. Something about today smells of beauty, of eternity, of mundanity and melancholy, of wisdom and absurdity, of death and of life itself. Something about today dangles on the literary strands of arguably the most famous playwright of our civilization. Yes, I know you people might have guessed it. We have had a record for having a brilliant audience, and you've probably guessed it right. For we have with us a splendid pillar of modern society, the Bard of Avon, Mr. William Shakespeare. Mr. Shakespeare, welcome to our congregation. We are humbled by your gracious presence. It is so surreal to see you here well and alive in front of us in the 21st century. Or shall I just say, thy eternal summer shall not fade. So please shine upon us the halo of your wisdom.
Greetings, my fair lads and ladies. It's a pleasure to be here today. I think I would never imagine, even in my great splendor, as it were, that I could be so honored and so revered as a man who wrote plays that defined society, that defined the language. And today it feels almost theotic, godly, to be here, to see you all with such respect and such admiration in your eyes. And I hope that my plays shall continue to pleasure you for generations further. And the time that I'm in, they shall be recognized as the best I could possibly do. Thank you.
Oh, Mr. Shakespeare, how quaint are your words, and what a tranquility they cause. Yet, amongst a lot of modern speculations about your work, a popular belief remains that most of your works were plagiarized, that there was no Shakespeare, and that Shakespeare was just a pseudonym for another writer, or maybe a group of writers. The Shakespeare we've so proudly claimed to be our poet, we do not even know who he was. And maybe this speculation arises from the material of anonymity and obscurity on his personal life. How would you react to this speculation about your existence or non-existence?
Does doth believe I be'st not flesh? Doth who had read my words, who had cried thy tears, who had laughed thy laugh? Does doth believe they be the words of a nom de plume? They be the words of a phantom, a ghost of non-existence? Nay, I be a man of flesh and blood, like you all. I have lived, I have died. I've had children and I've had a wife. And I think out of all of this, I forgot that what I was and what I became. I strive to live as a man, but I became what I wrote. It is a tragedy that people believeth, I be'st not real. But nay, it is a jest, a falsehood. I be'st as real as you all sitting here before.
Mr. Shakespeare, we do believe you, and it's so good to know that you do exist. Now, how many of you have read Shakespearean plays or are at least familiar with them? Anyone? Okay, 1%. Still, I'm not going to interrogate you. Okay. So, what if I was to tell you that our favorite Shakespearean characters have come to life? That the charm of Juliet, the quick wit of Portia, the passion of King Lear, and the angst of Hamlet have all defied their creation and stepped into this world of ours? Mr. Shakespeare, behold this classic collision between fiction and reality. Behold, through the tempests of doomed love, arrive our star-crossed lovers, Romeo and Juliet.
Good morning, sir. So, first of all, it's a great opportunity to meet the progenitor of our ideas. Guys, sir, my question to you is, if my initial liaison with Rosaline would have been successful, what would have become of my beloved Juliet?
My beloved star-crossed lover, Romeo. Most prized of my characters, I believe, the most famous. Thy tryst with Rosaline? For I believeth that if thy trust with Rosaline would have borne fruit, Juliet too would have found comfort in the arms of Paris. If it be nay a drama, it was a word of life that exists all around us. Men marry, women marry, they have children and they die. It is the wheel of life that moveth along for years and years as it continues. Thy tryst with Rosaline, I think it was thy belief that thy love with Rosaline existed that allowed you to fall in love with Juliet. For I believe that in the absence of Rosaline, you never would have understood what Juliet felt like. The emotion that I thought to convey through the love of Romeo and Juliet existed because of Paris and Rosaline. Existences of one-sided love. Loves that were forsaken, that never could come to reality.
Mr. Shakespeare, could our story, Romeo and Juliet, be written as a comedy, given that the stage was set forth with rather comedic elements?
Aye. For many a day I've been asked as to how I wrote people for tragedy and comedy. And I answer, I flippeth a quarter. If thou landeth on the Queen's noble head, it'd be a comedy. If not, it'd be a tragedy. For Romeo and Juliet to be a comedy could have been a very, very well possible existence. In a world yet different from ours, Romeo Montague could have crashed the party of Juliet Capulet and run off with her, or yet to be found and exiled, never to fall in love and be a question of jests. So yes, it's true. It could have been. But what could have been and what is are two very different worlds.
Though, sir, if it wasn't for the great folly of Friar Lawrence, would I still be with my beloved Juliet?
Does not believe I would have been with thy Juliet, or exiled noble? A boy raised in the shadow of nobility all his life, a girl so pampered she feels like a tender rose, does not believe I would have survived the peasant's life, living in exile alone and forsaken? Nay, you could not have bore the weight that your actions carried. Thy death was thy awakening, and it was the cause that caused your parents to be living in happiness forever more afterward. So nay, I don't believe it. Nay, you could not have survived, even if you did not die.
Yes, sir. In the beginning of it all, Romeo can be seen dedicating lines of heartfelt poetry to Rosaline, the woman he's seemingly in love with, and then he abruptly falls in love with me. That poses a question. Was he ever in love with her, or for that matter me? Was his love for both of us nothing but harmony, youthful passion?
Romeo is a man who is ruled by his passions. He believeth he fell in love with Rosaline, and he liveth his life dreaming of Rosaline. But then a look of Juliet Capulet makes him break down to the ground. A bird flying high sets his feet down to the ground, and he realized that his love for Rosaline be yet a fortitude of his own mind, and his love for thy, for I believe is a cup of poison, be it the proof that he did hold love for her. It was love true and pure, and for thy as well, I think. You too loved him, did you not?
Thou says the poison of love inflicted its wound upon me by the hands of Juliet. This character, Romeo, asked thyself that whether this poison has ever inflicted a blow on thy side.
It would be a question that I've pondered over a long time, Romeo. For I believe it to be true. The arrow of Cupid hath struck me through. My beloved Anne, yet not with me today, but forever living in my heart. She, my beloved, from my age I was yet unborn, green boy who lived his life with dreams of becoming famous, to now a man who so revered he beeth, question of his own existence. I did love once, and I will love forever.
Dicer, the last question comes to both of us is that will our immortal tale of love stand the wind of this new amorous novel, this new generation? Will it stand as pragmatic in the eye of this new generation?
In the eyes of the new generation, love hath not exist. A man's love and believeth. A man's love and believeth. Thy love exists in the eyes and hearts, through pictures and touches, through lips, through kisses and bodies. But I believe it's not. Love be a journey of spirit. It'd be something holy that exists only once, and it'd be true. A world that exists yet today? Nay. Romeo and Juliet cannot stand the tests of this new generation, for they believe it them be an idea, something that comes from a tale. And I hope that this notion will be forsook, for today's love, it is not love.
While we take your leave, let me remind you that I'll never forgive you for giving our love. Goodbye, Mr. Shakespeare.
Wow, Romeo and Juliet can be a little fiery. Well, for you, Mr. Shakespeare, you have written 154 sonnets. And out of those sonnets, which sonnet would be your favorite love sonnet?
Out of all of my sonnets, which would be my favorite love song? I had no idea. To be true. I write for it to be the muse of my heart, the Apollo that lived in me. I may not know for what I hold true. I write for the pleasure of the people, for the joy of others and the tears of those who love me. Favorites exist for those who choose. I may never choose. My sonnets exist as proof. They wait for you to choose, not for me.
Thank you so much for enlightening us. Yet, the surprises do not end here. For we have with us the witty, the clever noblewoman from Belmont. Please welcome Portia.
You know me as Portia, the judgmental, intellectual, and highly self-aware lead of your play The Merchant of Venice. I'm fairly happy with the ending that you gave me to tale. Though I do personally think that my cousin is a little bit. I have 3 questions to pose. The first is, to the reader, it seemeth that the play has no clear protagonist or antagonist. The focus shifts between 3 main characters, myself, Antonio, and Shylock. Was this intentional?
Aye, it was intentional. For it would be a trinity of the Holy Order. Portia, a woman yet young and brave. A woman so headstrong and self-believing that she believed that she could conquer the world. Antonio, the man who moved from door to door, from sea to sea, falling and failing, yet beseeched to pay a pound of flesh, and he was in trouble, and only be saved from the grace of his good friend Messiah. And Shylock, a man yet so looked evilly, but whence I wrote him, I did not believe him to be evil. Shylock showeth us the questions of greed. For greed exists in all of us, and retribution exists, a desire for retribution exists in all of us. Antonio's insults and his hatred for Shylock be as true on both sides. He desireth his pound of flesh instead of his payments, for to show that his hatred could bear fruit, that actions have consequences. Say yes. It had no protagonist and had no antagonist. The Merchant of Venice. It would be a tale. That's it.
Thank you. My next question concerns my beloved Bassiano's dear friend, Antonio. What dost thou think of the modern interpretation of Antonio being homosexual?
In the days that I had lived, that question could have been treasonous. For homosexuality was something that could not be accepted for centuries onwards, and is still looked upon with an evil eye. The men of this age believed him to be a homosexual, in love with others of his own kind. But I wrote of him not as is. Antonio, be a mirror of thy own self, a man stricken with trouble so harsh, he moveth from tempest to tempest, from problem to problem, yet still striving to live ahead. So nay, I did not write him as a homosexual, but though if believeth him be homosexual, I holdeth no quarrel with thee. For thy own characters are a reflection of thyself. It would not be a question, it would be an answer in itself.
My last question concerns myself. In the play, I donned the garments of a lawyer to save Antonio. Was this written as a form of ye old feminism?
Ye old feminism, a word I have not heard in my own time. Portia is not written as a feminist character, no. Portia is more an example of how far one can go to protect the things one loves. She donneth the wares of a lawyer to protect her betrothed's best friend, and it would be a quest she succeeds in. It had not be a show that a woman beeth as capable as a man, for it had already be proven that Portia be worth much more than a man can muster. It would be a show that wisdom and intellect can come from anywhere. It can be anywhere. It would not be a show of that women could outshine men, they could equal men. No, there are many women I've written, many maidens I've created, who forsake men for their own kind. They showeth us that it would not be necessary to have the company of a man to be smart, to be headstrong, to be making your own decisions. Portia, as a feminist character today, exists, it is true. She be headstrong, independent. As my beloved Romeo said, the ideal woman of the Aman's movement. But in the time of ye old, no, she'd be not a feminist.
Thank you for answering my question.
Thank you so much, Portia. Sir, we had also invited Shylock here, but he's not here because he's busy with some business. Good thing he's not here, we all love our flesh. Isn't it you who has said, are you sure that we are aware? It feels that we are asleep, we dream. How can we speak of Shakespearean tragicomedies and not mention A Midsummer Night's Dream? A play that in itself feels like a fever dream, while it makes you question the illusions, authorities, and idolatry of life. Please welcome the embodiment of our fears and our desires, Helena.
My first question to you is, you've made me seem like a really naive person in the play. Don't you think I deserve someone better than Bertram, considering my good qualities were tested by every character in the play?
Does those believe Helena to be a naive character?
Yeah.
The woman who tricketh her own husband into marriage? A man so yet against the woman who desired him? A man who desired freedom and enjoyment, yet still bound to fall in love with the woman he be betrothed to. Nay, Helena may be a naive character, as for thy betrothed, thy son. Bertram be a man very conflicted, like all men that live like that with us today. He be a man who enjoyeth his freedom, his baggages, and the questions of being bound by the order of the king he yet not respect, and a woman he hath despised his own life, by the words of his good friend. So, Helena did not deserve Bertram, but she desired him. And she got what she desired. For thy own worth is decided by her. Thou desired Bertram, and thou got him. For thy own worth, I believe not one man be worth what Helena be.
Thank you, sir. So, was there any real-life incident that inspired you to write the consequences given by him to me?
Nay, it would be an example of how harsh and how far a man could go. For a man to believe he would not bed his own wife, it would be a consequence of the harshest kind. For Bertram to attest to the fact that he would never lay with his own wife would be a promise and a question on himself and his own honor. It would be an example of how far one can push oneself, be away from what one does not desire.
So my last question is, Bertram was a really foolish person for not accepting me in the beginning because I was literally the perfect person ever in that play. Don't you think that maybe how did he become a Waller's husband in the end, considering like he was really mean to me in the beginning and didn't accept me as his wife?
For today's world does not attest to the fact that the trouble arranged marriages can bring. In a world where you cannot decide who you spend your life with, Bertram too suffered from this. He has not believed that he would be bound to a woman he did not desire. Diana, his beloved, that thou tripped. He sought freedom and comfort in her arms, for he believed that he had a choice. For taking away a man's choice is taking away his identity. Bertram ended up being a good husband, for he realized that the consequences of thy disappearance were so heavy, and his feelings for thine own were so harsh that he could not live, and that he submitted himself to the justice of the king, so that he could understand the consequences of the actions he had done. Thy return brought him back to life, but in the end, Bertram may be a valorous husband. His reluctance fades away and gives way to admiration and adorance. In a time afterwards, I believe, Bertram could have been a good husband. But at the ending of the play, my own words, he beeth not a valorous husband. No. He beeth a man who be put in a situation he did not desire, and making the best out of it. If thou thinkest a good husband, you could think so, but I personally not.
So let me remind you, I do not like you because you made me look very desperate in the play. Thank you.
Wow, it was nice meeting you, Helena. Sir, how are you liking your characters brutally interrogating you so far?
My interrogation so far has been pleasant. It is a joy to be interacting with my characters of those that I saw only on the footsteps of the globe. My characters were my own puppets to play with, and for them to answer is a desire and a joy I have yet to experience.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. Now I know we all like a pinch of drama. We like to make a fuss about petty, insignificant things in these colored bubbles of ours. Reflecting the same human emotion is the play Much Ado About Nothing, as the name suggests. And from that play graces our carpet, witty, clever, Beatrice.
Greetings, good sir. It is an honor to be in your presence, and I must admit that I am quite impressed by the character you bestowed upon me, the fair, proud, and clever Beatrice, renowned as the wittiest and brightest of all thy female characters, with a tongue as sharp as any blade. In your presence, I feel obliged to ask you, who has inspired my own personality?
Thy own personality was an augmentation of mine own self if I were born a female. Thine own some parts cometh from my beloved Anne, some from mine own sons, and some from the women I saw around me, those repressed yet with tongues of bright sharpness, those that sought to speak but could not. I, Beatrice, I represented a woman with freedom, a woman who could speak freely and without consequence. There have been many inspirations, but for me, you beeth the ideal woman one could have been.
Thank you, good sir. Now I would like to ask you this question which keeps me awake for nights. What would have happened had Benedict killed Claudio, and what would have befallen upon my dearest cousin Hero?
If Benedict, by thine own ministrations, had killed Claudio, I believeth all Much Ado About Nothing would have been a tragedy. For much like our beloved Romeo and Juliet here, I believeth Leonardo will send you to exile, away from thine own cousin Hero, whose beloved was Claudio, could not live forevermore. She would be yet in a tragedy, and thine own regrets would eclipse you, and you too would be a pit of despair and sorrow. For mine own thoughts move ahead to a time when I wrote Claudio as a dead body on the field with his rapier. And today I am glad that I did not, that for once someone lived.
Thank you very much for letting me have my life. Now, I would like to ask you, thou stated thyself that Much Ado About Nothing is a comedy, it's a romantic comedy, but it could have easily been a tragedy. How dost thou decide which of thine characters get a joyous ending and which do not?
Like I previously said moments ago, the ending of a tragedy and a comedy comes through the flip of a quarter. I believe it when I write it my own characters, they move with their own step. I yet not control how thou live. For in the end, inspiration cometh from beyond, from the muse that not yet is in my own control. Tragedies and comedies for me are two sides of the same coin. They liveth and dieth together, for in grief we find laughter, and in laughter one can desire our own grief. Tragedies and comedies of mine own exist, because I believe it that they be conveying the most pure of human emotions, joy and sorrow. Thine own ending, I believe it could have been a ministration of mine own thoughts. I believe that my own tragedies softened me a lot, and my own life pushed me to many decisions. Sometimes my own sufferings came out in my own characters. Their tears allowed me to get rid of my own, and sometimes my own joy became both that of their own characters. And then I write characters as self, and such is my joy today to see you here, made flesh, because it made me believe the notion that my characters too yet have lives, that they not be yet inks on parchment, that they be living flesh and blood with their own thoughts, thine own words, thine sleepeth not at night for thy endings, thy liveth questioning what I could have done. Playing God is not something a man is made to do, and yet I was, and it was something I took joy in.
Thank you.
We are enlightened, Beatrice. Thank you so much. Mr. Shakespeare, just out of curiosity, had you been a writer in the 21st century, what would have probably one of your comedies been called?
Had I been a writer in this age, what my comedies could have been called?
Yeah.
What one could have been called would have been The Glass Circus, a title I yet believe, seeing the skyscrapers that adorn the skies and skylines today. That tale of corporate deceit, of work that exists among people who work by their own sweat and blood. Another could have been Pavements and Archments. Many others come to mind. For today's world is much yet different from mine own. There are many things that are allowed. Portia asked this as well, Antonio as a homosexual. I believe that my own characters would have been much more different. They have been carrying the notions that move around in our society today. But I write it my own characters from the people that surrounded me, and the people that surrounded me today could have once more been made ink and parchment and characters.
Thank you, Mr. Shakespeare. You seem to have an answer for everything, God. So, in the Shakespearean spectrum of life, it is only common to delve into the smudged boundaries between good and bad, between evil and between right and wrong, and between heroes and villains. One such story, straight from the lap of history, comes Julius Caesar. Please welcome, with a thunderous applause, the Roman general Marcus Brutus.
Greetings, sir. It's an honor to share stage with you. Sir, I have few questions regarding my life. You have endowed me with traits that can take me to success, but same are the reason for my downfall. Please pray pardon me.
Brutus, thou art conflict, conflict made flesh, discourse and distrust, honor and morality fighting in the battlefield of a man's own mind and heart. Brutus, thine own best friend, thy Julius Caesar, the man thou hadst spent thy childhood with, and thy own beloved Rome, the people thou held more higher than anything else. Thou possess the characteristics that one would expect in success, art thine own downfall, because that is what it is for every single man that succeeds in fails. For thou possess honour, morality, honesty, but thou also beest naive, and believing in the words of those that should be distrusted. Cassius, Antony, men who yet did not desire the good of Rome, but only their own. But thou could not see this, for thou were living in a world of discourse and despair, where thou could not attest to the fact whether thine own friend deserved to live or to die. In the end, thou convinced thyself that Julius Caesar could not be the best that could happen for Rome. Thou made a decision that thou did not have the authority to, and thou eclipsed the power that thou did not deserve. But it proved to be a testament to the fact that honor has price. Every man who has pride can have a fall. Thou showeth all of us that being a good person doesn't mean that you could be successful.
Thanks, sir. What do I stand in Julius Caesar? What's my role in this?
For I believe that many people consider Julius Caesar himself to be the protagonist, but mine is not the case with me. I believe in Brutus to be the protagonist, for if Brutus had not collaborated with the others, the plots of assassination might yet have failed. Brutus represents the power to make decisions by thine own self. Brutus represents the conflict that exists within us all, the struggle of good and evil to eclipse one another, to make flesh our own desire and selfishness, and yet still be forgiving and honourable. Thou, Brutus, are what Julius Caesar is. The tragedy of Julius Caesar might yet have been the tragedy of Marcus Brutus.
Answer. Therefore, I have been a complex character.
Thou hast been the most complex character I have yet to pen down. Many people believe that many of my characters possess desires that they do not deserve, traits that they could not empower. But thou, Brutus, thou beest the greyest shade of grey that can exist. Thou beest a man who is so in love with his own city, with his own duty, that he forgets the love that he holds for those around him. For I have yet read a quote of a modern writer whose name I have yet forgot. Love is the death of honour and duty. Brutus is the exemplification of honour and duty being pushed over love.
Sir, that's a lot of things.
Thank you, General. Interesting questions. Back to Mr. Shakespeare. Sir, you've been known to set your plays in different cities across the globe. Yet, there are no records of Shakespeare traveling to any country or any place outside of Europe or even England. How do you respond to that?
For my response is, when the time yet I lived, my beloved Britain was the heart of the world, where every man desired to be and every woman was allowed to be free. For the tales of men and others beyond came to the shores of beloved London, and I could hear of different cities, of Venice, of Cyprus, of other cities yet I had not seen with my own eyes. And for the settings of mine own plays, they were but mere instruments. My plays could have been set in anywhere and any time, but I chose to set them for they exemplify the societies that they represented.
Wow. Seeing the world through the eyes of others. That is why you are a literary genius. Now that we've had our query answered and we have already traveled to places like Venice, Verona, Sicily, and even ancient Rome, it is time for us to meet a troubled prince. Ladies and gentlemen, hold your breaths for the most fascinating character of English literature, a caricature of her bitter melancholy and cynicism. We have with us the Prince of Denmark, Hamlet.
Greetings.
Greetings.
My first question would be, am I a noble son avenging his father's death? Or am I just a mad prince creating courtly chaos?
Thou, Hamlet, art a man who is filled with bitterness and malice, yet does not give in to his own desires. Thou representeth the power that grief can endow on a person. Thy father's death by the hand of thine own uncle. We representeth the power that others can hold over you, and that how a man can transform when he is not allowed to make the decisions he can. Thine own plot to murder, Claudius, if it be the ravings of a mad prince lost in the vasts of his own mind, and if it be the expression of grief of a bereaved son who seeks to avenge his father. There'd be no whites and blacks, there'd be no answers that I can give you, for I myself have no answers as to how you'll be represented. You could be a man who is given into his madness, a man who is hell-bent on causing chaos and destroying all that he once held dear. Or thou could be a man who is so believed in his own grief that he cannot see past what is in front of him. He seeks revenge so forcefully that everything else goes to waste. Thy own beloved Ophelia, thine own mother, everybody else falls prey to thine own ravings. So no, Hamlet, I have no answers for you. It is a tragedy, but it be the truth.
Ghosts are not meant to be trusted, but I still believe in them. Love is meant to be trusted, but I don't love anymore. To be or not to be, my question is why I am so undecisive.
Why thou art so indecisive, Hamlet? A question that many might have pondered. Why Hamlet be so indecisive? For I believeth that thou art such, because I wrote, indecisiveness as the part of thy character. Ghosts are not to be trusted, yet ghosts may yet exist. Love is never to be believed, but thou believest too thy loveth no one. I believeth not that to be true. Thou lovest thine own mother, but thou hateth for her desire. Thou lovest thy beloved Ophelia, but hateth for her belief to spy on. You convince it yourself that thine own actions could have no consequences, and yet at times thy consequences made their marks on you and left you bereaved with a weight you could not carry. Hamlet is a burdened man, a man wounded, a beast who is seeking solace in the arms of his own self. Thy delusions of ghosts, which yet not could be proven, but thou believest by thine own death that thy father beeth a ghost, yet nay else can see him. Thy indecisiveness is what maketh you. Thy indecisiveness is what breaketh you. To be or not to be is a question thou answered thyself. Thou tried to be as the man who thought to be, and yet became a man thou sought not to become. In the end, becoming a tragedy full of horror and malice. A man one could not see beyond. A man who could not see beyond those that lay in front of him. Thou, Hamlet, as a character I pondered over the most by my own self. Of how I wrote thee, I yet have no idea. Thou art the representation of my own self, of mine own bitterness, of how it became to be flesh, and how I could not give in to my own desire, but I allowed you to. Thy indecisiveness is what allowed you to become you.
Well, it can be one of your things. Is justice the business of people or of God? My question is, how will I quench my thirst for justice?
Justice is the quest of God and man, and yet a king is God made flesh, a divinator of God's own will. Thy, Hamlet, Prince of Denmark, a man who sought to become king yet could not, for he was not the heir and was banished. Thou desired justice, but thou could not get the deliverance. And thou soughtest to inflict upon thyself that weight of that punishment. Justice is a sword that carries an edge very sharp, one that can kill thine own enemy and one that can wound you fatally. The sword of justice swings equally for both man and foe. Thy quest for justice is never quenched. Thy thirst for justice is never quenched. Thou dieth and thou killeth. But in the end, does thou believest thou be happy with what thou perceived and the action that thou performed?
What is the Denmark? What is Hamlet? The Denmark, the king of Denmark. A tragedy, an uncomfortable tale of romance, or a heroic prose? What is it?
I believe it to be the tragedy of my tragedies. Hamlet, at once I have been repeating myself, a man whose tragedy made flesh, a man who liveth tragedy and who dieth for tragedy, a man treacherous yet honourable, a man full of morals yet immoral, a man delirious yet clairvoyant. Hamlet is a tragedy, Hamlet is a hero, and Hamlet is bereaved romantic. I yet have no answers to the questions that thou askest me, but what I can say is thou believest Hamlet to be thine own self. For mine own self thinketh of Hamlet as a tragedy, for I wrote of him as a tragedy, the tragedy of mine own self and mine own desires, of treachery and grief, of sorrow and pain, of what could become of a man if he had not control over himself. But yet it could have become a tale of heroism, for if Hamlet had lived, it could have become a tale of drama that could yet not be paralleled. Thou, Hamlet, are a man who lives in conflict, like our good friend Marcus Brutus. Thou art also conflict made flesh. Conflict of thy own self, thine own mind against thine own heart, thy vision against thy thought. Thou wrotest thy own tale, not by mine own hand.
Well, you gave me a voice. You have written my character. But if I have to say one thing, I'll say I forgive you, because that's the way out of this loophole, from your tricks and from your tragedies. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Highness. Your overthinking is very relatable. We all know Shakespeare for his courtroom tragedies and even comedies. And more so, we know these high-born women being restricted and being passed on as mere possessions between husbands and fathers, a kind of passive victims. We know these women to be socially restricted and poisoned by their femininity. One such character from the tragedy Othello is Desdemona.
My first question to you, sir. What is thee maketh Othello doubt me so easily when I was incapable of thee, even a bit disloyal to him, let alone having an affair?
Dost thou understand how Iago succeeded in his ministration of convincing Othello to kill thee? Othello was a man full of doubt, a Moor among the Venetians, a man who desired honour but could not get it because he was yet so different from those that surrounded him, a brave general who was yet looked down upon. He believeth that thou did not desire him because he did not believe himself to be worth of thine. He convinceth himself that thou sought comfort in the arms of another, for he could not provide you with what thou desired. Thou were loyal, Desdemona, but Othello was doubtful not of thine, but his own self. He could not come to terms with what that he was given, and could not yet understand that the honour that he had in being with you, and the privilege that he possessed with you by his side, was something that was a gift, and he thought himself to be forsaken yet by like all others, and that too was the reason that thou died.
My second question. When Othello did doubt me, why didst thee not make him talk to me or Cassio? Weren't we both, especially I, trusted him?
For a man to be in so deep trouble about his own existence is nothing he can trust another with. Could Othello come to thee with questions about who he was? Could he ask thee to define him, his identity and the life that he had lived, the suffering that he had suffered and the words that he had heard for so long and so yet long? Othello was a man who was bereaved with troubles of being a man who was in a position that others had never held before him. and that brought within him doubt that he did not deserve what he had. Despite his brilliance, Othello was full of conflict about his own self, yet could not identify who he was and could never understand that what he had been given was his own and not a providence.
My last question. Was I ever did love by Othello as a human being? Or didst that gent loveth me as a prize that he had won? For even if I riot, been disloyal to him, would killing me be all right?
Thy question is thine own answer, Desdemona. Othello killed thine, for he could not understand what thou represented for him. A woman so loyal for a man he thought undeserving. How could thou be with him? How could thou love him? A man who did not deserve to be loved. A man who could not be loved. For him, he was a prize to thee, and for thee, thou were a prize to them. Othello could not come to terms with the conflict that thou represented for him. He could not yet understand as to your love was as pure as could have been, and he believed himself to be true. He believed that his own undeservingness eclipsed thine love for him. He killed thine, for he could not understand that the gifts he had been given were gifts, and that he deserved them. He thought himself undeserving, and that was his downfall. Killing thine, no, that could never be acceptable. But acceptance and rejections are not what control the desires of men. It is by thine own emotions that thou art made and thou art broken.
Thank you, ma'am. I guess Mr. Shakespeare is having a good time with us.
I believe so. Like I yet say that there be more of my tragedies, yet there be of joy. And it breaks my heart to see them filled with resentment for my decisions. For they yet be flesh, I had not thought so before. And to see their resentment and malice towards me is something that breaks something in me. And I had yet now thinketh I should have only written comedies. For I could have been happy today as all my characters and endure with me the joys of life, but yet life is not as such. Tragedies befell all of us, and joys are enjoyed by us all. So I asketh all of my characters, forgive me, for I yet be a man made by his own decisions. Thy resentment for me is something that I shall live on with, and it shall be with me till the end of my days. And I shall now understand that decisions do have consequences, something that I sought to perceive to others I never could bring to myself, and now it shall be with me till the end of my days.
Mr. Shakespeare, it's okay. Resentment is only human, and isn't it you who made your characters so complex so as they question you, their creator? I think that's a feat. Moving on, there are some plays that make us question, that ask more questions than they answer. These plays leave us paralyzed and bewildered at the prospect of life itself. A hallmark of Shakespearean tragedies is suffering, madness, and power. Arriving before you, the lead of one such tragedy, a deadly combination of madness and power, nobody but King Lear himself.
First question to you. In the first few acts, we come to know mine own daughters don't respect her. Why not? Is there any flaw in their upbringing?
Dost thus believe, Lear of Britain, that thou deserve the respect thou so deeply desired? Dost thou believe it, a man so yet caught in the desires of power could be respected? For a man to yet not respect his own parent is not a question on his upbringing, but the identity of his own parent. For a child to not hold in regard his own parent is something that is a testament to the malice and bitterness that you hold in thy heart. For thou could not impart on thy daughters the joys of life, and they grow to resent you. Your own daughters, they suffered under thou, and that suffering became visible at the end. In their treachery to beseech you, they became madness, they became treachery made flesh. And thy quest for respect is what allowed you to banish those that yet still supported you. And they were the cause of your downfall.
So, therefore, the the rest of my story end with tragedy? Why is not my story joyous?
A mad king so deep in the rush for power and respect that he banisheth his own daughters and his own ministers. Dost thou believest it could end in joy, O great King Lear? A great dictator who desired to control all others and to sought to bend to his will all that stood around him. Does not believe such a man could have lived a life full of joy? Nay, all that of such men are made of tragedy, and they suffer for all the suffering they've caused. And such was the cause with you. Thine own daughters let down to the pit of treachery, and thou suffered for thine own actions.
Instead of judging me, I would like to ask you, couldn't you make me a little bit more sensible? I banished royal ministers from my court and had kept the betrayers in.
The touch of madness in thy is visible, O great King Lear. Thine own questions makes me question of how I wrote thee. For thou to banish thine own loyal ministers makes us understand that thou never did understand what loyalty stood for. Thou believest flattery and pleasures were the mark of loyalty, that those that stood not to question you were those that supported you, and those that chose not to obey your will were those that conspired against you. Yet it was foolishness, a jest made flesh among us all, I think of you there. For you to ask that loyal ministers be banished and your own beloved daughter, who held you in regard even for all her suffering, be sent away to France. It was a show of how far you had fallen from the man you once were.
I can't bear to prove you wrong, but you have proved me right.
It is my desire to always keep doing so.
Mr. Shakespeare, I understand that you must be tired, but present here in this room is a lovely lady from one of the last plays you wrote. Let us summon her with an exquisite quote from your own book. It goes like, "We are such stuff as dreams are made of, and our little life is rounded with a sleep." Please welcome the beautiful, kind-spirited Miranda.
Good sir, my first question to you is, I am primarily described as kind, loving, and relatively naive. How do you think my naive and humble personality affected my character?
For thy naivete and thy kindness are what made you, Miranda. Thy desire to teach a treacherous Calibero, who sought to assault you, and yet you strive to teach him thine own language and words. A man who could not love you, and yet you sought to provide him with humanity and love. Fernando, the man you did fall in love with, a man you saw at first glance and understood the honor and wit that he carried. Thy naivete is what made you, and Prospero understood it well. Thine own quests are what I understand as the struggles that many women suffer in their own life, being thought of as delicate flowers who can yet not be untouched. But the power to make thine own decisions are what allow you to become thine own woman. Thy kindness and thy naivete is what I thought to provide with you, and I think I did succeed. Thou were supposed to be a woman who believed the good in all others and could not yet see the evil that lived in people. You did at the end, I believe, but after such trials that many might yet not suffer.
Mr. Shakespeare, do you think I could have had a better reaction to me being assaulted by Calibero?
Nay, dost thou think I could have had a better reaction? If a man you had put hours of blood and sweat to become a good companion, a good friend and ally, a man you had taught your own tongue, you had fed by your own food, and yet he sought to betray you. He sought to steal your most precious possession, thy maidenhead. Dost thou believe that he deserved better? Dost thou believe that Calibero, despite all of that thou did for him, was a good man who believed more? Thy naivete and thy kindness is evident, Miranda. Even after suffering so, you still see the good in all others, and yet you still desire the betterment of all others, even such as the scoundrels of Calibero, son of Cyclops.
In the play, I submit myself to Ferdinand, my first love. What came about your mind when deciding this?
For submitting thyself to Ferdinand was something that was very important to your own character. I had never met men beyond your own father in Calibero. To meet a man who fit your desires of perfection, thou could not convince thyself not to submit thyself. For Ferdinand represents thine own desire, and thine Ivet as well. For thou thought him the best among men, and yet you had not seen the suffering that men strive to push upon all others. Thou did not see the treachery that others of his own friendship, Stefano and others, they sought to do. Thy submittance to Ferdinand is something that I believe made you what you were at the end. A woman strong and kind, a woman loved and honourable. Ferdinand sought to temper you and made you what you are by curbing that stopped you from becoming what was the best of yourself.
Thank you so much, Mr. Shakespeare. I just like to say I shall never forgive you for making me go through so much as a mere 14-year-old.
Thank you, dear Miranda. And Mr. Shakespeare, how lovely has your presence been, and how equally warm our audience and teachers. Yet, in this dramatic fold of history, in this meeting between the bard and his creation, one cannot help but ponder how far is fiction from reality, how inseparable fantasies from human lives. May not all our innermost lives and dreams be but a midsummer night's dream? I let these questions cling on, and I call upon the characters for an address with the bard.
For a man so full of wits and vocabulary, I yet could not understand, and it is a grievance that I shall hold forevermore. For mine own characters, I have yet the words I have said once before. I could never think that thou could be made flesh. For the actors that walked on stages of the globe were but mere representations of mine own mind. They held no will, and they could not speak yet what I had not sought them to. For all of you to come here and question me, my choices, my decisions, have allowed me to become a man yet better than I was before. To see all of you, some full of joy and some full of whatever. It allows us to understand that characters are also human beings. And that is what I always sought to pursue. To make characters as close to being men and women as possible. And it is what I think most people love most about the plays that I wrote. To see characters that yet so closely resemble themselves. Of men who had problems and joys, of who had to face trials and overcome others, to become good men and have the rewards that they so richly deserve. And I hope to continue doing so, yet not in death, and be a representation of what can be, of a standard that all writers now look upon to, of characters so complex and so full of detail that they feel as though they walk on with us every single day. To all of my characters, I say this: those that fell to tragedy, I ask that thou forgive thee. For a man who broken by his own decisions, and for those who suffered joys, who enjoyed their own lives and suffered and got love and admiration from others, I say, keep living, keep striving forward to be the best that you could possibly be. For thou art good men and women, fair maids and fair lads, and thine own life is thou to live. I sought to create thee, but I do not control thee. Thou art now men and women of thine own self. Thou shalt continue even when I am gone. Thine own representations and identities, they change every day, yet Shakespeare is but a mere nom de plume who rests within Canterbury. I think that concludes all that I, in my humbleness, have to say.
Thank you, everyone. This has been a lovely morning. Now, as is our ritual, I call upon our principal, Ms. Shafak Maham, for an address to everybody present here.
Good morning, everyone. I am lost amongst the characters, trying to work it out which character I read about when. But Shakespeare, you will adore it.
Thank you, ma'am.
And inspiring as well, as you're all aware that coming Thursday he has to appear for an and is here. That demands a big round of applause. I am lost with your these and loves, and the way you carried your character, amazing. And all of you have really given heart to the character. I could imagine in you everyone, be it Miranda, be it Hamlet, everyone, very beautifully worked out. Keep it up. Thank you all. Least but not last, librarians, amazing. I'm grateful, especially to you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Not everyone, but grateful. I'm grateful to you.
Ma'am, this is very
This is something which I should say should go on and on. Because I think this will give a new look to the library, and hopefully all of you will read Shakespeare now. Because as Shakespeare is not something very happening to you, today's generation, but after hearing all the characters, I presume that you all will go through the different writings of Shakespeare. Thank you all.